Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel, and if you're new, thanks for stopping by. My name is John, and this channel focuses on home brewing. Today I'm going to be brewing a New England IPA on my garage electric home brewery. I'm going to walk you through the recipe design, including the grain bill, the water profile, the hops addition, and how I fermented this beer. So stay tuned. I kicked off this New England IPA Brewday by heating up 10 gallons of reverse osmosis strike water to 170 degrees and 9 gallons of RO sparge water to 152 degrees by using my electric kettles. My Anvil boil kettle is 15 gallons and it's just big enough for 10-gallon batches. My HLT is a 10-gallon Anvil kettle. Both of these kettles use a Blickman boil coil for the heating element. The controllers I built for this system include a 30 amp, 220 volt controller that can quickly heat up water in my boil kettle, and a 20 amp, 120 volt controller that can also quickly bring up water to recirculating and sparge temperatures. While waiting for the water to come up to temperature, I started prepping my grain bill, hops, and salt additions for the water profile. As I've done with all my brew days this year, I'm using a recipe designed by a fellow brew tuber, the Beer Junkies. I'll post the full recipe in the description. My plan was to follow his exact recipe to achieve the hazy, juicy, creamy mouthfeel of a New England IPA. I slightly modified the Flaked Oats percentage and substituted the white wheat malt for Torrified wheat. I hope the beer is somewhat close to his recipe, but if not, it's home brewing, right? Here's a rundown of my grain bill. I'm crushing 19 pounds of Pilsner 2-row, 3 pounds of Flaked Oats, and 1 pound of Torrified wheat. These grains should give me a starting gravity of 1.056, an SRM of 3.5, and my estimated ABV should be right around 5.6. I use reverse osmosis water, or RO water, which should be free of any ions or chlorine. I'm adjusting the water profile to get the chloride to sulfate ratio of at least 2:1. This should enhance the soft mouthfeel that fits the New England IPA style of beer. There are quite a number of water profile tools to help calculate salt additions. For this brew day, I used the Beersmith water profile calculator, and it couldn't have been any easier. I just plugged in the target parts per million of my salt additions based on the Beer Junkies guidelines, and Beersmith calculated the salts in grams for both the mash and sparge water. To get my water profile, I added calcium chloride, gypsum, and pickling salt. My water profile looks like this: 50 parts per million of calcium, 5 parts per million of sodium, 35 parts per million of sulfates, and 70 parts per million of chloride. After the salts were measured, I weighed each hop additions that will be added during the whirlpool stage at 180 degrees. Whirlpooling is a process that spins the wort in the kettle that creates a cone of hops in the center of the kettle. I'm adding 1.45 ounces of Amarillo, 1.45 ounces of Citra, 0.72 ounces of Mosaic, and 0.72 ounces of Galaxy. I also plan on adding 2 rounds of dry hops, 1 round after 5 days once the primary fermentation is complete, and then another around 10 days. After I was done prepping the ingredients, I transferred my strike water into the mash tun and began to mash in. If you're new to all grain brewing, this is the part of the process where the starches found in the grains are converted to fermentable sugars. Different mash water temperatures bring out different types of sugars in the crushed grains. For this mash, I'm shooting for 152 degrees Fahrenheit. This temperature produces a balance of fermentable and non-fermentable sugars, resulting in a balanced beer. After 60 minutes of mashing, I transferred the wort to the boil kettle and then transferred the HLT sparge water into the mash tun and batch sparged for 10 minutes at 170 degrees. This process helps wash all the residual sugars away from the spent grains. After batch sparging, I transferred the rest of the wort into the boil kettle and brought the wort up to a boil. I picked up a new trick to avoid messy boilovers by adding firm cap S to the boil. This is an anti-foaming agent that reduces the chance of a boilover. In the past, I kept a close eye on boilovers when brewing 10-gallon batches on my 15-gallon kettles. I've definitely had a few. FermCap S really did an awesome job at eliminating boilovers for this brew day. After my 60-minute boil was complete, I turned off power to my electrical element and started cooling down the wort to 180 degrees using my counterflow chiller. Once I hit 180 degrees, I added my hop additions and whirlpooled for 20 minutes. Adding my hops at this stage creates the delicious tropical, juicy, and fruity characteristics of a New England IPA with a soft bitterness. After 20 minutes of whirlpooling, I dropped my wort temperature to pitching temperatures and transferred the wort into my bucket fermenters. I recently added 2 fermentation chambers to my brewery that I'm using with this New England IPA. I hooked up 1 bucket fermenter to my glycol system and placed 1 bucket into my new fermentation chamber. I plan on monitoring the power usage throughout the fermentation process with these electrical meters to see how each system performs. These meters measure total time running and the power usage. A few things I'll compare include efficiency, time to cool, and ease of use. I plan on posting a follow-up video with these results. Once the fermenters were hooked up to their temperature control system, I pitched Londona Ale III in the fermenter and hooked it up to my do-it-yourself glycol system. I then pitched Imperial Dry HOP yeast in the fermenter in the new fermentation chamber. Both of these yeast strains have medium to low flocculation characteristics. Flocculation refers to how long yeast stays in suspension, and this trait typically creates a hazy appearance found in the hazy style of beer. I'm looking forward to comparing the flavor profile differences between these 2 yeast strains. After 4 days, I added 2 ounces of Amarillo and 1 ounce of Mosaic to each fermenter. After 10 days, I'll add 2 more ounces of Amarillo and 2 more ounces of Mosaic to each fermenter and let each fermenter rise up to 72 degrees and then cold crash it for a day, keg the beer, and I'll enjoy it. All right, the New England IPA I brewed a few weeks ago is ready to taste test. I have 2 versions of this beer. The first version was fermented on Londona Ale III, and the second version was fermented on Imperial Dry HOP yeast. I'm really interested to see how these 2 yeast strains compare. I also picked up a beer from a local brewery called Other Half, and this particular beer is called Forever. I wanted to get a baseline of a commercial beer that I enjoy so I can compare it to the beer I brewed to see if I was even close to a hazy IPA in the color, the taste, and aroma. Now, the original gravity for this beer came in at 1.054, and for the Londona Ale III, the final gravity came to 1.011, which gave it an ABV of 5.64. Now, the Imperial Dry HOP yeast came in at 1.010, and the ABV was 5.78, so a little bit higher ABV using the Imperial Dry HOP yeast. Now, in terms of color, the one in my left hand is the Londona Ale III version. I think they're very similar in color, as you might expect if it was the same batch. But one thing I do notice is it's definitely more hazy than the Imperial Dry HOP yeast. And as for the aroma, I do get hops, the hops I'm expecting that I used in the brew. The Imperial Dry HOP yeast is slightly different to the nose. Now, as far as in terms of taste, I get the soft mouthfeel I'm expecting. There's a little bit of a dry taste in the aftertaste. I think this is very close and what I would expect from a New England IPA. Now for the Imperial Dry HOP yeast. It's a little bit different. It's similar in terms of, I do think of a New England IPA when I drink this. I don't get as much as a soft of a mouthfeel as I do with the Londona Ale III, which is interesting. And it definitely has a rounder taste to it. And it's not as dry, so it's very interesting. Now let's go ahead and compare it to the Other Half beer. Now this particular beer is called a Forever beer. It's a local brewery in Philadelphia. I really enjoy their beer. And this beer comes in at 4.7%. It uses very similar hops I used in my brew. It uses Mosaic, uses Cashmere and Citra, which similar but not exact. So let's go ahead and taste this to see how close my beers came to a commercial brewed beer. This is definitely more of a soft mouthfeel, more of a drier finish. I get more hops out of this particular brew. Now, I think in terms of the beer I brewed, I'm really happy with it. I've been drinking it for a few weeks. I think this is a great starting point for me to experiment moving forward of perfecting my New England IPA or taking it where I want to take it. So, hope you enjoyed the video. Cheers. That's it for this brew day. Hit that like button, subscribe, and drop a comment below on what you would like to see next. I hope you found this information useful and somewhat entertaining. See you next time. Cheers.